Good morning, Kinaway members. Happy NAIDOC and welcome back to another episode of KinawayTV. Before we kick things off this morning, I'd like to acknowledge the Bundjalung people as the traditional owners of the land on which I'm coming to you all from. I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which each and every one of us are tuning in from and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to also extend that respect to other Indigenous peoples who are present here this morning. Before we get things underway, I'd just like to take a moment to remind our viewers of the support services currently available for Kinaway members. The first support package on offer, which is in collaboration with Kinaway member Claystone Marketing, is free access to Claystone's social media and marketing course. The course provides an overview of social media marketing strategies and tools, which helps highlight marketing opportunities for Indigenous business. It's a great resource and it's really helpful for businesses looking to solidify their online presence. In another collaborative effort, Kinaway is excited to partner with Boost Legal Templates, designed for small businesses. Boost Legal Templates gives you clarity, safety, and access to real quality legal templates. Just complete the friendly questionnaire and you will instantly receive your own legal template, which you can take pride in knowing it has been created specifically for your business. This collaboration will save member businesses time, money, and ensures businesses are on the go while implementing good business governance. Kinaway is proud to offer members a 25% discount across all Boost legal templates. So if you feel you need, this is something you may be interested in, please contact the Kinaway team. Another support package we're looking to deliver is support for our member businesses around digital capability, whether it be looking to website development, e-commerce capabilities, social media and marketing, and many other components surrounding a business and its digital presence. So please keep an eye out for this. I'd like to also mention the confidential phone crisis line for Victorian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people launched by the Victorian Aboriginal Health Service. This service is for Indigenous people and families who feel they may need to have a yarn with someone about their wellbeing. This 1-800 helpline is a statewide social and emotional wellbeing service. The helpline, whose number is 1-800 95 9563, will operate 7 days a week from 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. And you'll find their contact information on the screen throughout today's webinar. And finally, there are plenty of webinars on various topics available on our Facebook and YouTube channels. So please feel free to jump on at any stage and make yourself familiar with the content. Along with these webinars and support packages mentioned, Kinaway is still offering the usual forms of business support for our members. So if you feel you may need assistance or support of any kind, please feel free to get in touch with contact with the team here at Kinaway. For today, we're pleased to be hosting part 2 of a 3-part series revolving around financial planning with the goal of ultimately helping those people participating to be better positioned to create generational wealth. Those that missed the first webinar, it is still available to view on both the Kinaway Facebook and YouTube channels and is a discussion for those who may be in the infancy of their financial earning capacity on how to effectively manage their financial affairs. This morning's webinar will be a discussion around the importance of superannuation and what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people need to know to ensure their financial affairs are in good shape for retirement. Before I introduce today's panellists, I'd just like to note, please be aware the information provided is factual in use only and is not intended to be a financial product advice, legal advice or tax advice and should not be relied upon as such. The information is general in nature and may omit details that could be significant to your particular circumstances. Joining us to discuss this morning's topic, we're thrilled to welcome back Lynda Edwards. Lynda joined us last week and I'm pleased to say she's back joining us for this morning's discussion. I did a little intro last week on Lynda. However, for those who may have missed it, Lynda is a descendant of the Wankamara and Barkindji people of far western New South Wales and is a passionate advocate for financial inclusion, fairness and financial resilience for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across Australia. Lynda has completed the Diploma of Financial Counselling and has been involved with consultation groups around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander financial literacy, the Commonwealth Consumer Affairs Advisory Council, Indigenous Financial Services Network, Telstra Indigenous Advisory Committee, Telecommunications Industry Ombudsman Consumer Panel, the ABA Consumer Outcomes Group, Indigenous Financial Resilience Research Project with the First Nations Foundation, Australian Council for International Development and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Financial Literacy Forum, which is now in its 13th year. After spending more than a decade in the finance sector, Lynda is now the Coordinator of Financial Capability at Financial Counselling Australia. And joining Lynda, we're pleased to welcome Phil Usher to join us for this morning's discussion. Maintaining a strong connection from his childhood growing up amongst the rich culture of the JBWere people in Tamworth, First Nations Foundation CEO Phil Usher also has family roots that make him a proud Wiradjuri man from central New South Wales. Growing up, Phil was fascinated by the past of some of the world's wealthiest people as a teenager. Not the money itself, but the process of amassing a fortune. Phil harnessed this knowledge, obtaining a Bachelor of Business at the University of Newcastle before establishing an extensive career in the industry. Successful in his role as a business advisor, he now runs an investing education business offering digestible education to everyday Australians looking to build their investment portfolio. Driven by a personal vision to empower Indigenous Australians with world-class financial education, Phil joined First Nations Foundation as Treasurer in 2017, ensuring the stringent financial foundation of processes, procedures and controls. Embodying the spirit of the national not-for-profit organisation, Phil was appointed CEO at the beginning of 2020, eager to continue using his expertise to contribute to the financial literacy and prosperity of all Indigenous Australians. Having already helped over 1,600 people across 21 communities reconnect with $24 million in superannuation since 2014, Phil played a pivotal role in the world's first virtual financial literacy training program designed by Indigenous Australians for Indigenous Australians. My Money Dream is fundamental to ensuring accessibility and relevance, resulting in both short and long-term benefits for individuals and their communities. Using his voice and knowledge to promote the importance of the First Nations Foundation, Phil is a regular finance commentator on ABC Breakfast TV and has been featured in countless industry titles. Phil and Lynda, I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me on. That bio was long, man.
It was, wasn't it? I was thinking it's taking up too much time because we have a really interesting sort of topic to discuss today. So we'll get straight into things. Lynda, just kicking off you. I know that you joined us last week, and I did mention that. But for those who may have missed it, can you tell us, a little bit about your role at Financial Counselling Australia?
Certainly, James. Good morning, everyone, and happy NAIDOC week to everyone. My role with Financial Counselling Australia is as the coordinator for financial capability. That basically means that I'm looking after services that employ financial capability workers, and they are the people that go out and deliver information, education and awareness about financial literacy to our mob on the ground. That's part of my role. The other role that I have is basically any advocation, lobbying in terms of any issues, any financial literacy or financial issues that affect our people. And so certainly, there's a lot more involved in that, but that's sort of a really quick spiel.
Thanks, Lynda. I believe there might be a bit of feedback on my end, so I do apologise if that's coming through. Phil, I just throw it over to you. I understand you're appointed CEO at the start of the year in what we all know is some pretty adverse sort of conditions. Can you tell us a little bit more about First Nations Foundation, and some of the support and services that you provide?
Yeah, the biggest call for First Nations is looking at financial prosperity for Aboriginal people. And we look at that keyword prosperity. We really work well with guys that have got a bit of a foundation, so a bit of income or they've got stable employment. We help them to build up their wealth so we can start leaving this really good legacy or intergenerational wealth for other generations. It's probably opposed to where Lynda works, really on the ground with some of those challenging cases. We dabble in that a bit because that's just part of mob and what we have to do. But we're looking to really build them and move them up onto the probably the right end of the wealth continuum.
Sure, thanks, Phil. I know that we just touched on what you're doing at First Nations Foundation. And can you just, just provide us a little bit of information about just a bit about yourself and your personal sort of money journey and, any sort of relationship that you had, with money and money management, growing up to where you are now?
Yeah, so I'm one of 6 kids. Grew up in Tamworth, country New South Wales, in an Aboriginal Housing Commission area. And, 6 kids, you're never bored. You always got someone to play with, someone to harass. And then, it's not till you kind of get into your teenage years, where you start to get this perception of the world. And then you realise, just your money situation at home and how tight things really are. And I just got real curious after sister bought me this book on just money. It was just this basic introduction to money. I just got real curious around. I'm like, oh, what other fellas have a whole heap of money and we don't? And I just, as you can see, the books from behind me just grew from there. I was just fascinated reading them, like, why does James Pack have money? Why does Richard Branson have money? I was just curious as to how they accumulated it over that period of time, and it's just sort of spurred into different areas. Done a bit of financial planning, some financial consulting roles, as well as business advisory, and looking to mix all that into now to, give back to the community and see if we can move Aboriginal people forward.
Great, thanks, Phil. And Lynda, I'll throw it across to you. Can you just tell us a little bit about, your personal, sort of journey with money and, and the relationship that you've had with it along the way?
Thanks, James. Like Phil, I grew up in a very small community. My hometown is Wilcannia in far west New South Wales. I'm one of 14 kids in the family, so money for us was really, really tight, and there was not a lot of information or not a lot of conversations in our family about money and what money's used for. And I grew up, in terms of money is like payday. We'd be all, no one would go to school. If you work, no one would go to work. We'd all follow mum because she was the one that was getting the money. We'd be all there with our hand out for our little bit of money, and obviously, that left a minimum amount then of paying the bills and buying food and things like that. So I think I'm like Phil, at a really early age. I just didn't really want to be poor. I just thought about, being the, fourth youngest and having 10 older brothers and sisters with all hand-me-downs all the time. I just, wanted to have a better life. And I just thought, how am I going to do that? And, I thought about my education, and I sent myself away for boarding school, when I was really young. I went home to my mum and I said, just sign these papers. I'm going away to school. And she said, oh, you're going away? And I went, yep, just sign there. And away I went, and so, my experience with money, I did a small talk on humbugging in terms of my experience with family, that with that cultural obligation of looking after family. And it's just something that I've just really, am really committed to, is not setting my family up to fail, in terms of money management. So, I will advocate, I will support my family, but in terms of money, it's something that I just don't do. So, yeah. So in terms of my experience, I had to look at what the priorities in my life was in terms of, and that then impacted the money that I was using and having.
Absolutely, thanks, Lynda. And and kind of speaking on the relationship of money, we'll kind of move on to the topic today is around that superannuation aspect of it. So I'll stick with yourself for this one, Lynda. In your experience, how do people learn about super and the importance of it? And do you think that people really do grasp, just how important it is?
Well, I don't know about you, James, but as a young person and getting my first job, my thoughts weren't on what's super and, what's going to go into my account and, what's going to happen in my twilight years. It was really around, that I'm getting this wage and what am I going to do with it every week or every fortnight that I get paid. So, there's not a lot of conversations around superannuation when young people first start working. And that's really troublesome, and I have a great concern about that. When you first start a job, the important conversations that you should be having with your workplace, with your human resources manager around, what is super, what is super, why are you paying it for me? What accounts, is it going into? It's really, really important, I think, as a young person going into a job, that you understand, the importance of keeping those documents, those statements, so what's actually in your accounts. Actually having the confidence to be able to read it and know what your superannuation account actually has in it. So, talking to a planner or a financial counsellor, I do realise, I love planners, financial planners, and I do a lot of work with financial planners. But obviously there's a cost to using that service. And I work in an industry in financial counselling and capability where it's a free service. So, if you're not understanding what's in your superannuation account, talk to a financial counsellor, talk to a financial capability worker. That's the only way really that you're going to have a bit of an understanding about super and what it actually means. And it's for your future. That's basically what it is, As a young person, I didn't really understand superannuation. And now that I'm at the age that I am and getting almost ready for retirement, I wish I'd known then what I know now.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lynda. And Phil, I'll throw it across to you. So what are your thoughts on that? From what you're experiencing, how are people learning about the importance of super? And when they are they still in their, their sort of infancy of their earning capacity, or, are they towards the later years, of when they're earning money?
Yeah, I did financial consulting role for about 4 years with the government. And most of the guys I'd see were going into that retirement, and it was always around that 50 mark, that big 50 was people like, oh, geez, I might be retiring in the next 5 to 10 years. It's time to have a look at the super because that's going to be the main part of what's going to fund the retirement. So still the vast majority of people are waiting till that number, that they start looking after their super. And, traditionally it's a hard sell for younger people, right? It's something, I might be able to access till I'm 70. With the changes happening all the time of when you can actually access it, it's always increasing. So, right, that's a hard sell for young people to say, you should pay attention to this now because, in 35 years' time, you're going to reap the benefits. That's a hard sell for anything to be sort of that discipline. But the approach that I took, one of the things I learned from reading those books was compound interest. Every single book around wealth building always mentioned that. So for me personally, I just had this goal to have 100 grand in super by the time I was 30, knowing that, over the next 30 years, it just compounds to this ridiculous amount and ultimately it'd be like a safety net. Even if I screwed up life for the next 30 years, this amount would just compound with its return from its investment. So when I retire, it'd still be quite good. So that was a little sale to myself to tidy up super a little bit. Didn't have to be over analytical or get right into it. Just enough to know that it's going to be there for when I'm a bit older.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a great little tip and tool. Lynda, is there something you'd like to add?
I was just going to add in terms of that, how late it is that we look at our super, and I think about financial counsellors and capability workers work with people that are under financial hardship and going through crises, and understanding too that for your superannuation, that's a top up for when you get old, and if we know now that with the age pension, that people can apply for, you can't survive on it. And so your superannuation is going to be there to actually top you up in the later years of your life, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're just on an age pension and you can't afford to live. And you can't, we know our old people, they sometimes don't, have their air conditioners on because they're too scared that they can't afford to pay for it, or that they actually have very little food that they can afford after paying all their bills. So just being mindful that, your superannuation is a top up to your age pension when you get older.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lynda. And Phil, I'll stick with you. Can you just tell us, about how many sort of super funds are out there, and what kind of funds are these, and, do people have a choice of what sort of fund that they can use?
Yeah, so I learned start of this year when I was talking to one of the super companies, there's something like 195 different funds, although that's probably changed a bit now post-Royal Commission. A lot of sort of merging and combining together, but certainly over 190 funds is just massive and overwhelming when you're first learning about it. There's probably a few different broad categories. I'm sure everyone's seen on TV, the industry super fund. Traditionally when they started, it was, as the name suggests, specific for an industry. And even when super started, they were specific for just government, or they were specifics for, a certain type of business. But now they're fairly open as to which ones you can join. And we've had a lot of change in legislation around that flexibility. So the industry super fund, the whole concept is that you're paying less fees. You're not paying advisor fees. You're not paying these guys a lot of money to invest your money and get a return. So taking the fees out of it can have an impact of tens of thousands of dollars a year, sometimes even $100,000 difference over the time of your retirement. Flip that to retail funds, and that's your real kind of commercial product. So they are paying advisors money to invest on your behalf. And the trade-off is you pay them more money, they're supposed to get a better return because, they're the experts in doing it. But time and time again, you're seeing these industry funds perform just as well, if not better, and they've got lower fees. So they're probably the two sort of differences. So having a look at the industry funds versus retail funds is always good. Websites like CanStar, Morningstar, they'll kind of, rate those and give you a bit of an idea as well. And then we've got the one, which I think we might talk about a bit later on, is a self-managed super fund where you sort of ditch the superannuation fund, back yourself and set it up on your own, which has its pros and definitely has its cons as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Phil. And again, sticking with you, how can people maximise their super? So I know that you mentioned just the power of compounding in it, that you want 100,000 in there by the age of 30. What are some other sort of tips and tools, that are available and that may help people boost their super?
Yeah, just getting on top of sort of the basics. So having a look at what fees you are paying. A ballpark figure, anything that higher than 1%, starting to get on the higher end. You generally want the fees that you're paying to the super company underneath, below that. And even some of the cheeky fees they add in, like admin fees or fees for sending out paper statements, they generally put them on. So you can jump online for most of them now. You get your paper statement that you get sort of every year and just go through and have a look to see if they're under 1%, because that really adds up over that period of time as well. And the other thing is, have a look at your investment mix. So the investment, you've got cash, which is really safe because you put that in the bank and it's not going to lose any money. Right up to the stocks, which kind of go up and down a lot. What a lot of financial advisors suggest is that if you're younger, you should go for those more riskier things because you've got a lot more time to ride out any particular loss. And if you're getting closer to retirement, you want to be a bit more safer and go to cash. So just having a look at those two differences and seeing where you fit on the retirement scale and see if your investment mix makes up, is aligned with what you're doing.
Absolutely. Thanks, Phil. And Lynda, I'll send it back to you. Are there any sorts of tips or resources available that you think are really helpful for people out there wanting to maximise their super?
Look, in terms of, I suppose Phil sort of said it all, those extra personal contributions, I think, something you should look at, even if it's a very small amount, it does add up in the end. And certainly, going and seeing a financial counsellor and capability worker. And I think the biggest tip that I probably would give anyone is actually looking at your statements and understanding what's written on your statement. It's really important to know what that actually involved, because there are a lot of other things that, as Phil said, that's covered that can be covered under your superannuation account, is particularly around insurances, like for total and permanent disability, for example, and death. So it's really, really important to actually, when you get that super statement, to actually go through it. And if you can't understand or don't understand what it's saying, then certainly go and see a financial counsellor or a capability worker that will be able to take you through.
I'll just add in there too, like some of the impact that you can have, like $25 a week, just on like an average sort of market return, could be $60,000-$70,000 difference by the time you retire. Which you're paying $25 a week now. That's a massive. That's a really good car for when you're older, getting around in a flash car, or that adds to your holiday fund. So that's how you see fellas travel overseas all the time. They take 10 grand out. So $25 a week now can have massive impact, even though it seems quite small. Huge.
Yeah, and you can actually do that extra personal contributions through your work, through salary sacrificing, which actually then leaves you more money, that less money that you're paying the tax office, and more money into your account in terms of that salary sacrifice as well too.
Absolutely, that was a great bit of advice. And we're just talking about just ways to maximise your super. And Phil, can we choose how aggressive they are when they with investing your money in your super fund, or is it just the case of just signing up to a fund and just leaving it at that?
Yeah, they've gotten a lot better in this and giving the person a lot more discretion and going with your different options. So there's broad categories. There's kind of conservative, where you don't really respond well to market losses. It makes you a bit nervous. If you're seeing the market go down, you get really stressed out. There's a thing called the sleep test. Doesn't matter how old you are, how close to retirement you are, you need to be able to sleep and be comfortable with what you're invested in. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. Whereas you get fellas on the other scale that aren't worried about whether the market goes up or down. They're just jumping all in shares, and they know that over the long run that's going to have a really good return on their portfolio. So most financial planners will sit down with you and they'll go through a bit of a risk profile. Some super websites will navigate that for you, and what it does is it'll ask you a series of questions about how you feel about the market and losing money and gaining money. And it's really that emotive response to investing. And then at the end of it, they'll give you, a risk profile where they say, you're conservative, you're aggressive, or you're a balanced investor. So, balanced, as the name suggests, you're happy to take a little bit of a loss here and there. You certainly don't want to be seeing some of the 30, 40% decreases we've seen in the share market, particularly of recent times. But overall, you want to get this really conservative, 5 to 8% return per year. So definitely jump on your super fund website and, play around with that risk profile. And most super funds, they'll offer, a free financial advice session for their members, because, if they're helping their members maximize their super, both are sort of winning that as well. So definitely jump online and check out your super company.
Absolutely. Thanks, Phil. Lynda, I'll give this one to you. When can people access their super? Can you tell us a little bit about the preservation age, any sort of early release, and, even sort of the scheme around just that early access due to the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, look, James, there are three specific opportunities for people to actually access their super. So obviously one is the preservation age, and that's sort of changing a little bit at the moment. So it used to be when you were 60 years of age. I think now it's 65, and probably in another 5 to 10 years it'll probably be 70, because we're seeing a lot more people staying in employment in terms of that. But generally it's 65 years of age. You'll be able to either take your super out as a whole, or you could actually have a fortnightly or monthly payment from your superannuation fund. So it's whatever suits your situation at that time. In terms of that, I would definitely be going and speaking to a financial counsellor or a financial planner in terms of, of that, and what would best suit. Because you certainly don't want to get it all out and have it there and then spend it all in the next 2 years, and you're going to actually live and for another 10 years or 20 years. So be really mindful of that. The other two other reasons where you could get early release if you're not at preservation age. So one is if you are under financial hardship. So you can access up to $10,000 per year from your superannuation fund. So you do have to prove financial hardship and prove documentation in terms of that. And the other one is if you have a medical condition, so particularly terminal illness, you can actually, or any type of medical ground where you actually need money from your super fund to be able to get better and to be able to access medical services. I do know that there are some. There was a case when I was a financial counsellor that we assisted a grandmother to access her super to be able to get a set of false teeth. It would cost around about $11,000. And it was really interesting because, the super fund was saying, why do you want to access this money to get false teeth? And she sort of said, I've got all these photos of my family. And she had photos when she was with her daughter who was unfortunately murdered. And she said, and in all the photos, she said, I didn't smile because I didn't like my teeth. And she said, so now I can smile, So that's a really, good story about, how people can actually use that for benefit. And so she said, I smile in all my photos with my grandkids. And that's just absolutely beautiful. So those are the two reasons. And obviously there's a lot of paperwork involved with that. So getting assistance and getting advice from the right people is really, really important. We know that during COVID, that government sort of said, we know that people are going to be in financial hardship because you're going to lose your job, and potentially then you won't be able to pay, any of your bills. So we're allowing people to be able to have early access to their super if they've been affected by COVID. And so, people have, I think it was something like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, but around about $24 million was taken out of super for COVID. So it's a lot of people. I think the thing being mindful of here, because a lot of our mob thought, oh, well, I can go and get it, get this early release for COVID, but they weren't actually impacted by COVID, so they didn't lose a job. So government may, I don't think that they will. I think they'll be fairly, they won't do as much investigation, I would hope, into people, because they're already in financial hardship, so there won't be real reasons to actually audit them. But, they will be auditing those accounts to ensure that people are accessing because they've been impacted by COVID. So it's always really, really important that you get the right advice and information when trying to access super early. And sorry, I do have my repairman here, so if I could just mute, that would be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. I was going to ask Phil a question. Hey, Phil, I know that we spoke about the power of compounding previously. You mentioned it. For people that may have accessed, that sort of early release of super during the COVID situation that mightn't have needed to, what is that kind of long-term effect on their super fund? Is it just that initial 10,000, or obviously it's going to grow over time? Is like an average sort of figure, or?
Yeah, depending on your age, obviously impacts it if you're one of the younger fellas in your 20s. It can be upwards of 120 grand, from taking $10,000 out. If you let that compound and have the investment return over that 20 to 30 year life, it could be $120,000 that you've taken out of your future retirement savings. And again, that decreases when you get older and the less time you have for the compounding. But, $120,000. And some of the cases you're seeing, like if people weren't eligible, or even if they were, they'd be doing it and then buying a car because they wanted to upgrade their car or something. So you're taking, your money that was going to be worth 120 grand and you're buying a car that in 20 years' time is certainly not going to be worth very much at all. So it's really, really devastating. The other thing with the early release as well is some of the tax. They certainly don't miss you when you get taxed on early release. I'm not up to date with the legislation now, but when I was sort of in that space, it was around 22%. So you draw out 10 grand for emergency, they tax you 22%. So you lose 2.5 grand of your savings and your hard work just for withdrawing it early. So you really want to make sure that it's something that you need. And even if it's to help you through a period where, you're struggling, which is understandable, just thinking long term, how you can sort of repay that. Once you get back on your feet, can you start making those contributions of $100 a month to try and close that gap for your super that you drew on when you needed it in a period of time?
Yeah. And if I could just add to that, I do apologise, people. I just had to duck away from my screen. So in terms of, we know that a lot of people have early access to their super to be able to pay debt. And can I say that in terms of superannuation, one of the things that we really don't want our mob doing is paying off debt from their superannuation accounts. It's really, really, there are definitely things that a financial counsellor would be able to assist in terms of debt recovery. So make it that if you're accessing super, you're doing it for, the really good reasons of accessing it. That will be able to assist you because there are always negotiations and repayment plans that you can have in place and possibly some debt waiver in terms of your debt.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lynda. Phil, I'll get back to you again. Can you tell us a bit about, taking out your super to buy an asset like an investment property? Can you explain to us just a little bit about that process?
Yeah, so there's been, a big push over the last 10 years for what's called a self-managed super fund. And it sounds way more glorious than what it is. From the outset, you think, yes, I'm going to take my money and I can go buy whatever I want and I can access it whenever I want. But what you're essentially doing is taking on all the roles and responsibility that your super fund has to do. So, setting up a self-managed super fund, you have to have an investment plan in place. You have to update it a couple of times per year. It has to be audited. You have to, pay an accountant to audit it and to do all the returns and to make sure it's invested right. So there's a whole lot of red tape and burden that comes with that. There used to be a ballpark figure of around having $200,000 to $250,000 in your super account to make it worthwhile because it's just fees, right? We mentioned that 1% fee before. Like if you've only got 50 grand and you pay, a couple of $1,000s to your accountant to manage it, well, $2,000 of 50 grand is 4%. So you're paying a massive fee to do something that's quite similar to what's kind of happening. And I worked in North Sydney, right, when I was doing financial counselling. a self-managed super fund almost became the Mercedes in the driveway. It was just the thing that you had to have, that you were sophisticated, that you were kind of cool. And what has happened is they'd start a self-managed super fund and then give it to their financial advisor, which is pretty much exactly the same as what you're kind of doing with your super anyway. In terms of the property question, you can buy investment properties. You can buy commercial properties as well, which I'll probably touch on in a second in the audience. But they've really cracked down on the lending. People used to be able to go in and invest quite easily, and there'd be a lot of lenders in the market. There was generally a 70-30 rule, where you'd have a 30% deposit. So if you've got 200K in your super, you might be able to put that down as a deposit and then borrow 70% and buy a property worth, say, 600,000. And then there was always like a liquidity ratio as well, where you had to have around 10% in cash so you could cover some of those expenses. The thing is, if you're buying a property inside your super, you couldn't renovate it. You could only, have an upkeep for it. So whereas outside of super, you could go in there, you could add all these improvements to it and claim it as an expense, whereas inside super, it's a lot more limited. The one area I think it works really, really well, and particularly for business owners, is you can set up a self-managed super fund and potentially buy your office space or your workshop. So if you're a mechanic, for example, you can potentially set up a self-managed super fund and buy the shop that you're running from. So that way, when you're paying your rent or paying down your expenses of the business, it's actually going to your super fund as well. So it's a really sophisticated strategy that you can put into place where your business is sort of paying and propping up your super fund. But that's definitely one of those areas that kind of hit the advice and seeing a financial advisor or planner and getting the right structure to do that.
Absolutely, thanks, Phil. And Lynda, I'll give it to you for now. Can you tell us some about the superannuation sort of implications for business owners? So we've touched on people that maybe are getting paid super, but for ones that are business owners, what are some of the implications for those?
Yeah, look, this is probably really a question, an area for Phil. So in terms of the work that I do, it's more with vulnerable people and people that are certainly under financial hardship is the work that we do. We sort of really, in terms of, not really sort of getting into a lot of the issues that business owners and businesses would be getting into. If a financial counsellor, for example, came across any of those issues, there would certainly be a referral to a financial planner or certainly an accountant to be able to assist with that. So, whilst, I think everything that Phil said is pretty much is what happens in terms of, the implications for business owners. So, I really sort of can't really add a lot to that, I'm afraid. Thanks, James.
That's okay, Lynda. I'll send it to Phil. Can you just elaborate a bit more on, just some of the super sort of implications for business owners?
The biggest thing with business owners and super is, and I'll get this myself, having owned businesses, is you're backing yourself to build the business as the asset. Like you're thinking, if I pay super, that's just an expense that the business doesn't need. It crushes cash flow, and I need to be able for that to fund expansion or to pay staff. And the whole concept is that you're going to work for the next 20, 30 years, build up the business and sell that, and that's going to be your superannuation. And there's one guy that I'll never forget him because I seen him. He sat down and we were going through his entitlement for an age pension, and he had absolutely zero super, which was really odd for this guy who was about 60. And we're just getting there talking, and he had this printing business that he'd run for most of his life, and he built it up, just a local print business, nothing huge or global by any means. But he built it up to a point where they're doing, I think, 1.2 mil in revenue for printing. So they print, business card, flyers, promotional materials, everything. He was kind of the local go-to guy. And what happened was, from about 2009 to when he retired, I think it was like 2014, 2015, the revenue just decreased because we had this rise of things like Vistaprint, where you jump on and you print anything for like $7. So this period of time, he went from like $1.2 million to not actually being able to sell his business because no one wanted to go in and do the manual thing when you could do it all online. So this guy retired without a business, and he retired without superannuation because he was really backing himself to sell this asset. So I get that mentality of business owners where you think you're going to build this asset and you want to back yourself, but it's always good to have a bit of that backup plan. Super is generally treated the same whether you're a business owner or not. It goes as an expense. So if you pay yourself superannuation, it goes as an expense against the business. much like it would. Outside of that, you can get some tax concessions potentially. If you're paying it before tax, you can get a tax concession of 15%. And with your after-tax money, you can put in up to $100,000 per year as well. But I think having it as a line item on your expenses and operation expense, where you're paying yourself superannuation, even if you're starting out with a small amount, but gradually building that up over the period of time. So you've just got that bit of safety net, because you just can't rely on that business being worth the amount that you need for retirement in 10, 15, 20 years time. It's just, I've seen too many devastating things go wrong.
Absolutely. Thanks, Phil. I'm a little bit conscious of time, so we'll have just one more question. We have had a few questions that have come through throughout today's panel discussion. We'll take some time to do. And this one just revolves around NAIDOC Week, so I'll just give it to you, Phil. Obviously, it is NAIDOC Week. We just want to know how it's been for yourself, and what the theme always was and always will be kind of means to yourself.
Yeah, I think NAIDOC Week's always a chance to reconnect where I can, because I don't live at home. It's always good to go back home or see family or anything, and just kind of connect in whatever way kind of fits. Brother and I cooked up roux tail for the first time, and then some damper, which was interesting. We never had roux tail. We've always had roux, but we've never had the tail before. And we're just nervous about, where's it sourced from? Is it right? And it's absolutely amazing. Can't recommend it enough. So I was always just trying, connecting and doing that sort of stuff. I think that always was, always will be theme is really important. It just shows that continuity, for the generations from, that it's our land, and that we're continuing that fight and that conversation, because that's the expectation, right? You see elders go through this, incredible fight and struggle through 50s, 60s, 70s, and even before that. And there's sort of that expectation for that younger generation to pass that on. So it's about continuing that conversation and keeping people accountable, with pulling them up when you can. So that's sort of my perspective on NAIDOC Week this year.
Absolutely. Thanks, Phil. And Lynda, how's your NAIDOC Week been? What have you been up to celebrate? And if you can just tell us a little bit about what the theme, always was and always will be means for yourself.
Thanks, James. Look, I've had an amazing NAIDOC Week. I've been involved in a couple of online presentations, and actually learning, doing some moderating as well, which is building my capacity too as well, in terms of, the role that I'm in. But I suppose for me, NAIDOC has always been around people, and my mob, and connection, and having that connection to our families. And our families, we love to hate them, but we love them, all of those things that come. And I think NAIDOC Week is just an opportunity where we just all come together, leave everything at the door, and just come in and just celebrate each other. I always say that our connection to wherever we are, whether we're in the bush to to the rivers, to the land in which we're sitting, to the animals that we see, whether those people that are on the ocean with all the the beautiful ocean, and all the sea life. It's just really that connection. And I'm so proud to be an Aboriginal woman, and really sprouting my culture and my heritage to whoever may listen. I don't care, it's something that I'm extremely proud of, and always was and always will be, is that this land, we're in this land, our blood's in this land, our life's in this land, and it's something that they'll never ever take away from us. We know that governments tried to breed out the the Aboriginal blood in us, but it's never. We're a strong people, and we'll always be here, I think, from going on. And it's really an opportunity too to actually speak to our kids and our young people about our lives and what we went through, and for them to actually, and I appreciate all of my ancestors and all of the people that have gone before us to actually fight for our rights to be able to be here today. There's still obviously a lot of fight going forward, but I just really love NAIDOC, and I love being around my people, my community, and this area. So yeah.
Well said. Thanks, Lynda. And if you're ever looking to moderate any future sort of panel discussions or webinars, feel free to join Kinaway. We'd love to have you.
Thank you.
That's all for the panel discussion this morning. We did have a few questions that have come through, so we might spend the next 5 to 10 minutes just answering some questions that we might have received from the audience. And the first one comes from George, and he says, "Good morning, Kinaway and Lynda and Phil. Thanks for this morning. I understand the contributions are increasing over the next few years. Is that right? And if so, by how much? I'll let you take that one, Phil.
Yeah, I read this a couple of weeks ago. I believe up to 12%. It's been something that's going on for at least the last 8 years. I think whenever Labor were in last year, initiated this scaled approach where it goes from 9.5 to 10 to 10.5 to 11. So it gradually happened over a number of years, and that was frozen because of the economy and the costs that it have for people. But yeah, my understanding is it's going to gradually go up to 12% over a period of time.
Yeah. Can I just say that super contribution doesn't come out of your pay? That's something that your employer has to pay on your behalf.
Wonderful. Thanks, Phil and Lynda, and thanks, George, for the question. We have the next one has come through. This one is from Meg. Hi, Phil and Lynda. Quick question. I've had a couple of jobs and just sign up and with whatever super fund they suggest. I think I have a few different accounts. Should I roll them all into the one account, and how do I do that? Phil, I'll let you start with this one as well.
Yeah, we launched a website this year called indigenousuper.com.au, and I reckon it's designed well for you. So we go through, we explain a bit of super. So we've got an ebook there that walks you through how to consolidate your super and some of the considerations, like you have to have a look at your insurance balance as well as your fees. But yeah, jump through that ebook because that's probably a bit easier than I guess walking through the explanation on a webinar because it can get a bit detailed.
Absolutely.
Can I just say, like, when I hear about people wanting to roll all of their super into one, I always get this beep, beep alarm that just hits my head. So, Meg, just really be aware of, as Phil said, of what's in your super accounts, because what you don't want to be able to do is you don't want to have, say, for example, 2 or 3 super funds and you roll it into the fund that doesn't have insurance, because you will actually lose that insurance. So always in the first instance, if you're looking at, rolling your accounts, if you're not understanding what's in your super accounts, always get advice, always get someone to actually have a look. And you know what? Super funds are much more eager now to assist and help. So, always, keep that communication channel open with your super fund, that they'll be able to give you some suggestions as well. But always seek advice when you're thinking about rolling them. It is a really simple process, which I have real great concerns with. So advice, if I could just say that.
Thanks, Meg. The next one this morning, it is from Liam. Thank you, guys. This is a super important topic. As a student working part-time, I know I am contributing to my super. Are there any resources for young people you would recommend? Lynda, I'll let you have this one.
Look, I think the website that First Nations Foundation, has set up is probably, maybe one of the better resources that you could possibly possibly go and have a look at. In terms of resources, I would maybe, suggest a financial counsellor to be able to speak to. It is a free service, or a financial planner, if you have the funds to do that. There are some financial planners that are working within banks, like that you potentially could access for free as well too. So look, if I was pointing anyone in any direction, I would point them to First Nations Foundation.
Absolutely. Phil, are there other sorts of resources that you would suggest?
Our website's pretty good. Money Smart is usually not a bad place as well, so it's run by ASIC, because they're going to be pretty independent because they're the governing body of everything, right? So what they have that we don't is really cool calculators. So you can jump on there and see the difference that $20 or $30 a week can make over that period of time. So in addition to our one, indigenousuper.com.au, jump on Money Smart for ASIC. Yeah.
I really love the Money Smart calculators in terms of any type of financial issues that you would have, and also to that they have a financial capability section that runs that Money Smart website. So it's a very good website as well, particularly for Indigenous financial literacy issues.
Thanks, Liam. We have the next one come through from Zach. I want to pour my superannuation into funds with values that are similar to mine. I'd like to support super funds that invest in industries like renewables, etc. Is there anywhere I can find access that will give me information about that, Phil?
Yeah, so generally if you jump online, you can have a look at what your super company is investing in. So if you go to all shares, for example, they'll generally go through and list the shares that they've got. As a very, very broad concept, they invest in the biggest companies in Australia. So you're going to get your mining companies and your banking companies. So if you think they're a little bit unethical, they're just generally going to be in a lot of those portfolio mixes. We've seen one, I think it's Host Plus, took action against Rio Tinto. They're not investing in those companies because of what they did to the Aboriginal sites. So it's a real movement forward with these companies being more ethical. And then there's companies that have launched, I think Ethical Super is actually a company, and they have a stringent process around what they invest in. So you can either do it within your own fund to check off on your own personal level, or you can jump into something and explore something like Ethical Super, where they have a strict investment process and policy around that.
Sure. Thank you, Zach, for that question. This is the next one. It's from Jesse. He asks, what are some of the fees associated with having a super fund? Lynda.
Oh, look, certainly there would be some administration fees attached with you, like with all accounts, any type of financial account that you would have. There certainly would be probably the fees. And as Phil said previously or earlier in the conversation is, being mindful not to actually get paper copies, because that's always a cost that they will certainly pass on to people. So, wherever possible, have an online account. Be able to go online and actually see your account and print out your own statements is so much easier. I think there's, probably the admin fees are the only ones that I can think of that would be associated with superannuation fees. Yeah, in terms of that. Yeah, obviously, if you're getting money out, you're getting early release. There's a huge amount of fees that you would be paying in terms of that. So yeah, being mindful.
No worries. Thank you, Jesse. And I believe we have our final question for this morning that has come through. It's from Kai, and he says, good morning. What's the difference between retail and industry funds? I'll let you have this final question, Phil.
Yeah, it is the basic one. Traditionally, they used to be very specific, like industry, you had to be working in that industry, like a mining super fund, you had to be working in mining to contribute to it. But now that's changed, and you can move in and out of retail and industry funds. So they're probably less stringent around who comes in and out. But fees are generally the bigger one. Industry funds generally pride themselves on providing a quality product and advice for less fees, whereas retail funds will pay investment managers to get a better return. So what I always recommend is looking at the return to fee structure. So you might be with an industry fund, right, and they return 7% per year, and you pay 0.5% for that fee. So the net is 6.5%. It may be okay to pay 2% fee per year if a retail fund can consistently return 15% per year, for example. So you've got your higher fee, but the returns kind of make up for that. But what we're seeing time and time again, and even if you just jump into Google and say top 20 super funds for the last 10 years, you'll see that most of them are getting around that 7 to 9% return per year, regardless of whether they're paying a top line manager or not. So the fees generally the thing, and compare that to the overall return.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Can I just add, I was just going to add one more thing just before we go, probably in terms of, choice of super fund, and I'm not sure who it was, one of the questions was around that they have multiple accounts, is just being mindful that you now have your own choice of the super fund that you want, even if your work has a general one that they pay into. You do have a choice, so you can request that your super funds go into the super choice, your own super choice. And obviously, if you have any problems in terms of not getting your super paid or not having the fund that you want to be paid into, you can make a complaint to the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, which is AFCA, which will actually look at your issue and your matter to be able to decide. And I'm actually having a massive storm here at the moment, so with the hailstones as well, so it's really scary. But yeah, no, I just wanted to ensure that there are a process if you're not happy with what your employer is doing in terms of your superannuation.
Sure. Thank you, Lynda. Thank you, Kai, for the question. Thank you, everyone who who posted their questions today. Lynda, we won't hold you up for too much longer. I know you have a lot going on at home right now. So just on behalf of Kinaway and Kinaway members, we just want to thank you both for joining us this morning.
Thanks, guys. It's been good. I'll be back next week, I believe. Talk about some investments.
You will. I believe Lynda's off the hook for next week.
No,
but yeah,
yes, I am. Yeah. Can I say, James? Yes, I was going to say, can I say that it's just been absolutely amazing. If there's any questions or if there's anything that people want to follow up with me, if you would like to pass on my email address, that would be fantastic.
We can do that. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Lynda. And thank you to Phil again. And to those who tuned in this morning, thanks to all. We hope you all enjoyed this morning's panel discussion, and don't forget to keep an eye out for our upcoming webinars. If you do wish to attend these, please jump onto the Kinaway website to register your interest. And again, if you wish to catch up on the previous KinawayTV panel discussions or webinars, jump onto our Facebook and YouTube channels. We'll be able to access them. Until then, don't forget to leave a like on today's video, subscribe, turn on the notifications to receive Kinaway updates, and most importantly, have a wonderful weekend.